My wife accidentally called me while my family was watching the baby monitor. And on the call, I heard a man say, "So he still thinks it's his?" I turned to the screen, smiled, and said, "Let's run a DNA test tonight." Her jaw dropped. My name is Miles, and I've always considered myself an ordinary man. I don't mean that in a self-deprecating way, more like a statement of fact. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Allentown, Pennsylvania, went to a decent school, graduated college, got a stable job as an electrical engineer, and lived a life that, from the outside, looked like it was all on track. Nothing extravagant, but solid. Predictable. I like that. Predictability gave me peace. I met Brenna 6 years ago at a corporate conference in Philadelphia. She was a guest speaker, charismatic, confident, magnetic in a way I wasn't used to. She had this fire in her that lit up the whole room, and I, being someone who spent more time listening than speaking, was immediately drawn in. We exchanged a few words at the coffee station during a break, and by the end of the weekend, we were having dinner in a quiet corner of a noisy city. Everything with her moved fast. Fast turned into serious. Serious turned into a wedding after 3 years. And then, not long after that, we welcomed our daughter, Ava, into the world. Or at least, I thought she was our daughter. I was never the kind of guy who second-guessed people. I trusted too easily, or maybe I just didn't want to live in a world where the people you love could betray you. I guess some lessons come harder than others. The night everything changed didn't start with anything unusual. My mom was over for dinner, along with my younger sister Talia and her husband, Ron. It was one of those calm family nights that feel like warm blankets. Familiar, safe. The house smelled of baked ziti and garlic bread, and Ava had just been put down for a nap upstairs. We had the baby monitor sitting on the table in the living room, one of those video ones with sound. Nothing fancy. Brenna was out. She'd mentioned earlier that week that she was planning a girls' night with Savannah. I didn't ask for details. I trusted her. I had no reason not to. Or so I believed. I was pouring drinks in the kitchen when I noticed my phone buzzing on the counter. Brenna's name flashed across the screen. I answered it, but all I heard was rustling. Pockets maybe, and then muffled voices. I thought it was an accidental call and almost hung up. But then, a voice came through. A man's voice. Calm, but clear. "So he still thinks it's his?" I froze. Something inside me tightened. There was a pause. Then I heard Brenna reply. Her voice was softer, more hesitant than usual. "Yeah, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." I couldn't move. I stood there holding the phone to my ear while my family sat in the other room, chatting and laughing. Everything else faded out. The call was still going, still picking up voices, when I walked back into the living room. I didn't say anything. I just looked at the baby monitor. The Bluetooth feature had linked it to my phone, so the sound of the call was coming through its speaker now too. Everyone heard it. The man again. He's going to find out eventually. And Brenna. Not if we're careful. He trusts me. I stood there, staring at that monitor. My heart was thudding in my chest like it wanted out. But my face was calm. I walked slowly to the table, picked up the monitor, and turned to my family. "I think we should do a DNA test. Tonight." That was all I said. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just said it. My mom stared at me, confused at first, then horrified as the words sank in. Talia put her hand over her mouth. Ron looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. No one spoke after that. No one knew what to say. And honestly, I didn't want anyone to say anything. I just needed to hold on to something real, and right then, that meant getting the truth. Brenna came home about 20 minutes later. She looked happy, carefree. But the moment she saw our faces, she knew. Her smile dropped. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the baby monitor, and I saw the exact second it clicked. "What's going on?" she asked, voice trembling. I held up my phone. "You called me." Her face went pale. "You left your phone in your purse." It dialed me. We all heard it. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. She just collapsed onto the couch, face buried in her hands. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt like it could crack the walls. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked one question. Is she mine? It took her a long time to answer. When she finally did, it wasn't even a full sentence. I don't know. That was it. That was when I knew my life had split in two, before and after those 3 words. We didn't fight. I didn't demand explanations. I didn't want them. Not yet. I left my mom and Talia with Ava, drove to the 24-hour pharmacy, bought a DNA test, and came back without saying much. Ava was asleep. I swabbed her cheek gently. She stirred, but didn't wake. My hands were shaking the whole time. The wait was the worst part. 3 days. 3 days of pretending to sleep on the couch, of my mother taking over the morning feedings, of Brenna walking through the house like a ghost, sometimes stopping in the doorway just to look at me, but never saying anything. On the 3rd day, the results came. I opened the envelope alone in the kitchen. I wasn't the father. I don't really remember how long I stood there, holding that paper. Time kind of stopped. I heard the refrigerator hum, the clock ticking. Nothing else. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I just sat down and stared out the window for what felt like an hour. Then I packed a bag, walked upstairs, and told my mom we were leaving. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and started gathering Ava's things. Brenna tried to stop us at the door. She begged, sobbing, saying it didn't mean anything, that Dorian was a mistake, that I was Ava's real father in every way that counted. But you can't lie your way back into someone's heart after that. You can't rewrite biology. And love, as strong as it is, doesn't erase betrayal. I left. We're still in the middle of the legal mess. I know I'm not her biological father, but I'm fighting for some kind of custody. I raised her. I cared for her. I was there for every feeding, every late-night cry, every milestone. I don't know what will happen yet, but I know one thing. Trust, once broken, doesn't grow back the same. The weeks after I left were unlike anything I'd experienced before. When you pack a bag and walk out of the house you built, the silence that follows doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the air's been vacuumed out of your lungs. Talia had a guest room and insisted Ava and I stay with her and Ron for as long as needed. My mother came by often, almost daily. I think it was her way of keeping both her son and granddaughter afloat. The truth was, I didn't know what the HLL I was doing. I went from warm family dinners and sleepless baby nights with Brenna to navigating family court lawyers, paternity legalities, and explaining to people why I was suddenly no longer living with my wife. Most didn't ask directly, but I could tell they wanted to. The shift in tone was obvious. Neighbors, co-workers, even the barista at my regular coffee spot started giving me a different look. Not pity exactly. Something heavier. Like they didn't know whether to offer condolences or space. I took 2 weeks off work, called it a personal family emergency. My manager didn't ask questions, thankfully. I think the dark circles under my eyes did most of the talking. Brenna called every day for the first few days. Sometimes she'd text when I didn't answer. Most of the messages were long, rambling, emotional. Guilt spilled into every paragraph. She'd write about how sorry she was, how scared she'd been, how it had only happened once with Dorian before we were married, and how she thought she'd never see him again. Then she got pregnant. Then the timeline didn't make sense. She panicked. And when Ava was born, and she saw my face light up when I held her, she couldn't bring herself to tell me the truth. I read her messages, every single one, but I never responded. I'd stare at my phone some nights, Ava curled up on my chest, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, wondering what good a reply would do. What could I say? That I understood? I didn't. That I forgave her? I couldn't. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the deception, the pretending, the fact that I would have died for that little girl without ever knowing she wasn't biologically mine. The idea that someone else might have been laughing behind my back all those months. The pain wasn't sharp. It was slow and heavy. A quiet ache that didn't go away. Talia was a rock. She kept things moving in the house, helped me set up Ava's crib in the spare room, and made sure I ate more than just toast and coffee. Ron kept his distance, not out of disinterest, but maybe because he didn't know what to say. Or maybe he just understood that sometimes, saying nothing is the kindest thing you can do. One morning, a letter arrived. Not a text, not an email, an actual handwritten letter. Brenna's handwriting. I unfolded it slowly. The paper smelled faintly of the lavender soap she used to keep in the upstairs bathroom. Miles, it began. I know you won't answer my calls, and I understand why. I can't expect anything from you, not after what I've done. But please, please hear me out. I didn't plan for any of this. I never meant to deceive you. And when I realized what the truth might be, I froze. Every time I thought about telling you, I pictured your face when Ava was born, the way you cried when you first held her, and I couldn't take that away from you. So I lied. And that lie grew until I didn't know how to undo it anymore. She'd written pages, memories, apologies, explanations. At the end, there was one simple line. If you still believe in the love we had, I'll be here, no matter how long it takes. I folded it back up, placed it in a drawer, and sat there staring at nothing for a long time. I didn't know what I believed anymore. What I did know was that I loved Ava. That hadn't changed. I loved the way her tiny fingers grabbed my shirt when she stirred in her sleep. I loved the way she'd squeal when she saw her bottle, like it was the greatest surprise in the world. I loved how she recognized my voice, how she reached for me when I walked into the room. She wasn't my daughter by blood, but in every other way, she was mine. It was that love that pushed me to fight. I met with a family lawyer, explained everything, down to the exact night of the call, the DNA test, the emotional fallout. The lawyer had a look of cautious sympathy. These cases are complex, she said. Pennsylvania doesn't automatically recognize parentage for non-biological fathers, even if you were on the birth certificate. But the court will take into account the bond, the role you've played, and the best interests of the child. I was willing to fight, no matter how complicated, no matter how long it took, because Ava deserved that. In the meantime, I documented everything. Photos of her and me together. Videos of feedings, diaper changes, tummy time, her little milestones. I kept track of the nights I stayed up when she cried, the doctor appointments I went to, the bottles I washed. I needed to prove, not just to the court, but to myself, that I was her father in every meaningful way. After a few weeks, Brenna requested visitation. The court granted it, supervised, 2 hours twice a week. The first time she came over, Talia stayed in the room. Brenna looked thinner, paler. Her eyes were swollen, like she hadn't slept properly in days. She didn't speak to me at first, just picked up Ava and held her tightly, whispering things I couldn't hear. I stayed in the doorway, arms crossed, watching, trying not to let bitterness win. But it did. A little. That night, she tried to talk to me. Said she wanted to come clean about everything. Every detail, every mistake. I told her I wasn't ready to hear it. That I didn't need a play-by-play of how it happened. What do you want then? She asked quietly. I hesitated. I want to protect Ava. That's all I know right now. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and left. The months began to blur. Work resumed. I was back at the office, keeping my head down, going through routines. But every free minute was Ava's. I stopped going out, turned down invitations. My world had shrunk to one singular focus. There were moments, quiet, solitary ones, when I questioned everything. Why hadn't I noticed something was off before? Was I that blind? What kind of father would I be, really, if she wasn't truly mine? But every time those thoughts crept in, Ava's laugh would shatter them, like a bell ringing in a dark room, reminding me that none of that mattered. The bond we had was real. Real in the way she snuggled into my chest when she was tired. Real in the way her whole face lit up when I walked into the room. Real in the late nights, early mornings, and the million little moments that made up our life together. I was her dad, and I wasn't going to let her grow up thinking I walked away just because biology said I could. About 3.5 months had passed since the night everything imploded. It was a rainy Tuesday, one of those cold spring days that pretends it's still winter, when the court scheduled our first real custody hearing. I remember that morning vividly because Ava had woken up crying at 4:17 a.m. sharp, and I hadn't been able to fall back asleep afterward. I stood by the window in Talia's guest room, holding her against my chest, watching the streetlights flicker through a mist of rain. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't know that the people who loved her most were on opposite sides of a legal battle. She just needed her bottle and a dry diaper and someone to hold her close. And she had me. The court hearing was short, procedural mostly. They acknowledged the DNA test, confirmed Brenna was the biological mother. And then they acknowledged something else, something my lawyer had fought hard to emphasize. The judge looked at me after reviewing the documents and said, "You've been the primary caregiver since birth?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I've cared for her every day. She knows me. I'm her dad, regardless of genetics." Brenna sat on the opposite bench. Her eyes were red but focused. She didn't interrupt. She didn't protest. Maybe she knew I wasn't lying. The judge didn't rule that day. He said he wanted more information, more time, and a formal psychological evaluation of the bonding between Ava and both parties. It was fair, but it still left me walking out of the courthouse with a pit in my stomach. I didn't want to be fighting Brenna. I didn't want to turn Ava's life into a courtroom document. But I also couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything. She was my daughter, whether a lab said so or not. Later that week, Talia cornered me while I was scrubbing bottles at the kitchen sink. Ava was in her bouncer, chewing on the strap of her plush giraffe. "Are you okay?" Talia asked gently. I kept scrubbing. "No, not really. You never talk about what you're feeling." "I don't know how." She stepped beside me, drying one of the bottles. "You don't have to be okay all the time. I know you're trying to be strong for her, but you can break a little. You're allowed." That got to me. I didn't cry, but my hands stopped moving, and I had to close my eyes for a few seconds. "I just keep wondering," I finally said. "What happens if she forgets me?" "She won't. You don't know that." She reached over and put her hand on mine. "Miles, she knows who you are. You're her safe place. That doesn't disappear overnight." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Brenna continued her supervised visits, and with time, they became less tense. She wasn't the same person I'd married, but she wasn't the same person who lied to me either. There was remorse there, real, deep remorse. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, part of me saw the cracks in her too. One day during a visit, Ava was fussy, teething, we guessed. She wouldn't stop crying no matter what we tried. Brenna rocked her gently, humming an old lullaby under her breath. I recognized it. It was the same one she used to sing when we were still together. I remember her sitting in the nursery during those early days, swaying by the crib, exhausted and half asleep, singing that soft, wordless tune. Ava's cries slowed, then stopped. She closed her eyes, a tiny sigh leaving her lips. I watched from the hallway, something aching in my chest I couldn't describe. After the visit, as Brenna was getting ready to leave, she paused at the door. "I never meant to hurt you, Miles." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was filled with gravel. "I think about what I did every day," she said. "But I think about what you're doing even more. You've shown more love and commitment than I ever deserved." Still, I didn't say anything. She took that as her cue to go. The next big hurdle came during Ava's 6-month checkup. The pediatrician asked about family medical history, anything genetic, hereditary conditions, things they should be aware of. And for the first time, I didn't have the answers. I wasn't her biological father. I didn't know if diabetes ran in her real father's family. I didn't know if there were allergies, cancers, or conditions I should be watching for. It was another reminder of how much I didn't know, how much had been stolen from me. Later that night, I sat in the glider chair in Ava's room, holding her while she napped against my chest. The quiet hum of the baby monitor next to us was the only sound. And I finally whispered the words I hadn't dared to say out loud yet. I don't care who your real father is. I'm still here. She didn't answer, of course. She just breathed softly against me, her little fingers wrapped around mine. I held on tighter. There's something about being betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart that makes you see the world differently. You don't laugh as easily. You hesitate before opening up. You double-check everything. People's words, their expressions, their silences. But there's also something about loving a child, even one who isn't yours by blood, that cracks you wide open again. That reminds you you're still capable of giving, of protecting, of rising above your pain for someone else's sake. I didn't know where the legal fight would end. I didn't know what would become of Brenna and me. But I knew one thing for sure. Ava didn't ask for any of this. She didn't ask to be caught in the middle of adult mistakes. And she deserved to know what it felt like to be loved completely, without conditions, without shame. And I was going to give her that, for as long as I was allowed. By the time the court evaluations were complete, nearly 8 months had passed since I left Brenna. 8 long, quiet, emotionally raw months of diapers, bottles, 3 a.m. cries, court hearings, and therapy sessions. Not just for Ava, but for me. Talia had gently insisted I speak to someone. At first, I brushed her off, told her I didn't need it. But the truth was, I hadn't really talked to anyone about how it felt to lose the life I thought I had. When I finally did sit down with a therapist, the words poured out. Not just about Brenna's betrayal, or Dorian, who, by the way, never once came forward, but about my fear of losing Ava. About how unmoored I felt, raising a child who wasn't mine while fighting a legal system that didn't quite know what to do with a case like mine. It helped. Not right away, but little by little, it helped. The psychological evaluation showed what I already knew. Ava was deeply bonded to me. She associated me with safety, comfort, love. I wasn't just the man who fed and changed her. I was her person. And that mattered. It mattered in court, too. The judge, a sharp but fair woman with decades of experience, read through all the paperwork. She looked me dead in the eye during the final hearing and said something I'll never forget. Biology is important, she said, but it is not everything. What this child needs is stability, and from everything I've read and heard, Mr. Carter, you are that stability. Brenna sat across from me, silent, her hands clasped in her lap. The ruling came down. I was granted shared legal custody, not because I was her biological father, but because I had established myself as her psychological father. The court recognized the bond as vital to Ava's well-being. It wasn't full custody. It wasn't everything I had hoped for, but it was enough. Enough to remain in Ava's life. Enough to continue raising her as I had from day one. Enough to prove to Brenna that her secret didn't erase what I'd built with that little girl. But the real revenge didn't come in court. It came after. A few weeks after the ruling, Brenna showed up at Talia's house during a handoff. She looked worn down. Not in a malicious way, just tired. Beaten by her own choices. I've been thinking a lot, she said, eyes on the ground. I waited. I know I messed everything up. I know I lied. I know I hurt you more than I can ever fix. But I see you with her, and it's obvious who her real parent is. I didn't reply, just listened. I've been going to therapy, she added, trying to figure out why I did what I did. I want to be a better mom to her. I really do. I nodded slowly. That's good. Then she looked up at me. I was hoping, maybe we could try family counseling. Together. The old version of me, the man who believed in saving what could be saved, would have said yes. But not this time. I gave her a soft smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. No, Brenna. I think we're exactly where we need to be. Separate. She blinked. You don't think we could ever, no? It wasn't cruel. It was final. That was my revenge. Not screaming. Not lashing out. Not dragging her name through the mud. It was rebuilding my life without her in it. It was becoming the father she'd pretended I was. Only now, I was him, without her. It was showing up for Ava every day. Picking her up, dropping her off, going to parent-teacher meetings, soccer games, dance recitals. Watching Brenna show up alone and realizing, over time, what she'd lost. Because here's the thing, she didn't just lose me. She lost the man who stood by her when she was pregnant and scared. She lost the man who held her hand through the birth of a child he thought was his. She lost the man who would have done anything, for his family. And she saw that now. Every week. Every time Ava ran into my arms laughing, yelling, "Daddy," without hesitation, without confusion. Just love. There was one afternoon, a couple of years later, when Ava was about 3. We were at a park in Bethlehem. She was on the swings, and I was pushing her gently, laughing as her curls bounced in the sunlight. Brenna sat on a nearby bench, watching. When Ava ran off to chase butterflies or whatever caught her eye that minute, Brenna walked over, slowly, unsure. She still doesn't know, she said quietly. She doesn't need to. Not now. And when she asks, I'll tell her the truth. That love made her family, not blood. She nodded, swallowing hard. She loves you. I know, I said. And I love her. There was a pause. Then she said the words I think she'd been holding on to for a long time. I envy you. I looked at her then. Really looked. You should. And I meant it. Because I had something she didn't. Peace. Peace in knowing that I chose to stay, even when I didn't have to. Peace in knowing I gave a little girl a father she could count on. Peace in knowing I didn't need to destroy her to win. I just had to live well. And I did.